Right. Uh, okay. There we go. Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, no matter where you are in the world. Thank you very much to this session. My name is Dr. Antoinette Nestor, and it's a pleasure to introduce you to the chair of this session, Kazi Amdadul. Kazi, over to you.
Thank you, Antoinette, Professor Antoinette. Good morning again, everyone from Baku, and thank you for joining this critical session on climate resilience and migrant rights, hosted by Friendship jointly with Climate Law and Governance Initiative. As you know, climate-induced migration is a rising global challenge. Recent UN reports, I'm sure you're familiar with this, the estimate that around by 2050, climate change could displace up to 200 million people worldwide. And legal protection yet to be realized by the almost all countries, and for these individuals remain insufficient. We'll continue an hour plus, and I would like to refer a statistics here. I'm sure you know only for Internal Displacement Monitoring Center, which is IDMC, in 2022 report that indicates a weather-related disaster displaced approximately 31.8 million people worldwide. Hypothetically, if we're breaking this down, daily around 87,000 people, individuals displaced. And the session will continue for an hour. And in this hour, approximately 3,630 people will be displaced. Very unfortunate, very sad. And we can't accept this crisis and challenge. And we can't accept this frustration. These figures highlight the urgent need for comprehensive strategies to address and mitigate the impacts of climate-induced displacement. And let me introduce you our very vibrant speakers, and it's a combination of different background and experiences. Barrister Ayesha Tahsin Khan, Senior Director and Head of Inclusive Citizenship at Friendship. She will share her field experiences, her insights. Next, Professor François Gemenne from HEC Paris Business School and University of Liège, Hugo Observatory. We had session yesterday in the evening. So he also, beyond her academic experience, he is very vibrant in both Africa and Asia with the issue through different projects. We are very glad and grateful for Professor Her Royal Highness Mrs. Marie-Esméralda, with us today for her and she'll join with her concluding remarks. In the very beginning, let me introduce you Runa Khan, who is the founder and executive director of Friendship. And I'm really honored, and she is passionate about local solution and advocacy for global understanding in addressing from context-specific assistance up to establishing rights. Unfortunately, due to schedule conflict, she is today joining with the Minister of Disaster Management Relief, and we decided to split ourselves to take forward our mission with different stakeholders, different avenue. And I would like to request kindly Runa Khan's back office to support in screening her pre-recorded speech as the opening remarks for this session. I'm sure her message will set the tone for the discussion and provide invaluable context for the session's focus on justice, resilience, and rights for climate migrants. Please let me know if you face any technical difficulties. Please.
I'm so happy to be here amongst all of you today. So, what is the difference between the poor and the internally displaced communities? The poor have a land to stand on, they know their ecosystem and their communities' available resources all around them. The displaced communities have nothing of that sort. Not knowing if the home or land they stand on will be there tomorrow. All around them, the unknown communities too are those who have lost everything. They are the helpless, and the hopeless. To understand governance and justice, we need empathy to understand climate injustice and laws which are not governed for them. According to the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center, only in 2022, climate-related disasters displaced more than 30 million people, leaving them homeless. By 2050, it's predicted to be 200 million. Sea level rise, erosion, storms, droughts, desertification, and loss of livelihood. Many of these individuals come from low-income countries, and of course, some of the most affected regions include the Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Latin America. Climate migrants have no legal entitlements, thus no extra protections, which is of course needed in terms of access, knowledge, or services. Each migration leaves them poorer, often losing all they had built after the last migration. Imagine this. Feel what it would be like if you lose your home and everything precious to you year in and year out. When they migrate, their whole socio-economic, political, communal ecosystem becomes different, leaving huge gaps to reach vital services like healthcare, education, land, housing, and thus, of course, resultant unemployment. UN High Commissioner for Refugees recognizes that there's no specific legal framework protecting climate migrants, as climate displacement does not currently meet the definition of refugees, which was under the old, made under the old 1951 Refugee Convention. The lack of legal recognition is a huge barrier to providing necessary support for them. I remind this of this every time I meet them. And on top of that, even the World Bank estimates that migrants who lack legal status face 30% lower wages. And of course, this is worsening poverty. Just legal rights could help them have dignity, enough to be a contributory community, not only to their country, but to the whole world. Establishing work entitlements is no longer an option. It is a must and a necessity. How can we address this ever-worsening issue? Here at COP29, seeing oil extractions every morning as we come into COP. But nothing is hopeless if we stand together and stand firmly. Defining climate migration in international law, the first step, we push UNHCR to recognize climate migrants legally. The Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration is a promising framework, but it totally lacks binding enforcements. We need a dedicated international legal status, words like refugees for them, so that they get protection across borders when they cross borders and provide them with access to resources. Countries can establish policies to safeguard migrant rights, enabling access to healthcare, housing, and job opportunities. For example, a separate national policy framework for migration. New Zealand has piloted a climate refugee visa program, and other nations could adopt this, similar programs to provide safe legal migration pathways. A mechanism for securing financial resources for adaptation efforts, including funding for local services, is critical. The Green Climate Fund, for example, must be expanded to include specific provisions for communities that host climate migrants. This is absolutely a necessity. So that to scale up services for them, you need this extra funding. The migrants need to understand the way they can migrate and integrate their socio-economic, political, within their ecosystem each time that they migrate. How to get linked, receive government healthcare services, education services, and justice. This would enable them for getting the output from the resilience which has been forced upon them for every migration that they have suffered from. and to rebuild themselves. Even knowing that they have legal rights provides security and empowers individuals to become active participants in their new communities. When migrants are given the right to work and contribute, they can boost local economies more than 13%. And with legal rights, migrants can be part of a local adaptation efforts like climate resilient infrastructure and the indigenous knowledge to strengthen food security and initiatives. Enhancing climate resilience through legal protection for climate migrants is not just a matter of justice, but a matter of survival for millions of this world today and tomorrow. As climate impact intensifies, this is compulsory and a responsibility of the world and of the world's conscience-driven people for ensuring human dignity in the face of one of our biggest challenges. This action must be done today.
Anything, Tanjil?
Yes, the video has ended. Yeah.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Well, great. I'll surely convey our thanks and appreciation for her inspiring words, but at the same time, very critical points she raised to whatever we are now addressing. It's not favors, it should be their rights, and to make sure dignity and hope. And yes, if we can make sure their rights, they can contribute for accelerate the adaptation, mitigation, and resilience. Another important point, because this vulnerability need to be addressed, and finance is a big issue, and global GCF, I think need to rethink about the whole strategic vision, how they can expand their support, Green Climate Fund. So I think we are now take forward our discussion, and she referred from IOM and some other organizations about the consequences is really coming. Now I request let's learn from some field experience how friendship demonstrate the opportunity scopes with the available resources and within the legal system, how we can revisit our legal system, how can we really establish an example from Barrister Ayesha Tahsin Khan. I believe her insights and practical experience will help us in understanding the paradigm shifting and how we can take to support these communities. Barrister Ayesha Tahsin Khan, please.
Thank you very much, Amdad. Yes, I'm just going to highlight some of the activities that the work that's done on the field. So for those who don't know anything much about the chores or do know, but still a bit vague about the landscape, I'd like to kind of highlight that the chores of northern Bangladesh, it's a landscape characterized by shifting river islands and floodplains, and are emblematic of the relentless force of nature and the challenges it brings to human settlement. With every monsoon, floods and river erosion reshape this geography, forcing many to leave their homes and seek new ones in an unending cycle of displacement. Between 2014 to 2023 alone, nature disasters displaced people within Bangladesh 14.7 million times, with the residents of Chor disproportionately affected. These communities are continually adapting, yet the nature of this displacement renders their lives uncertain and precarious, depriving them of a stable foundation upon which to rebuild their future. It is a turbulent environment. Securing legal rights for those internally displaced people is not only a moral imperative, but also an essential step towards climate resilience. The UN guiding principles on internal displacement emphasize the responsibility of states to protect internally displaced persons, while the global impact for migration calls for international cooperation to address the root causes of displacement, including climate change. The Paris Agreement, with its focus on adaptation and resilience, further underscores the need to support vulnerable communities disproportionately affected by climate impacts. At Friendship, we translate this global framework into actionable strategies that directly benefit the Chor communities. Our initiatives aim to uphold the principle of dignity, safety, and inclusion for climate migrants, ensuring that they are not left behind in the broader fight against climate change. Over the past 2 decades, Friendship has dedicated itself to serving the marginalized people of the Chors, bringing its expertise to address the challenges of displacement through an integrated model that combines legal aid, healthcare, and climate action. Our work underscores that resilience starts with rights, and our efforts to enhance the lives of climate migrants center around the foundation, a belief that everyone deserves recognition, security, and stability. Our commitment to inclusive citizenship is rooted in the understanding that legal recognition is a prerequisite for stability. Chor community, with its itinerant lives, shaped by flooding and erosion, often lack official identification documents, which restricts the access to essential services and support systems. Without legal standing, these individuals cannot secure land rights, participate in local governance, or enroll their children in schools. Friendship's Inclusive Citizenship Initiative provides vital legal support through mobile legal clinics where our trained staff help individuals obtain birth certificates, national identity card, and other essential documents that affirm their status as recognized citizens of Bangladesh. Our collaboration with local authorities amplify these efforts, ensuring that even in remote areas, Chor residents can access legal support necessary to secure their future. We've seen firsthand how impactful these initiatives can be. For instance, in one of our project sites, securing identification with just one community led to a chain reaction of increased school enrollment, higher employment rates, and a greater sense of ownership over the land and homes. Friendship's long-standing presence in these regions enables us to understand the nuanced challenges the Chor communities face, allowing us to develop tailored solutions that facilitate their journey towards stability. In areas as remote and transient as the Chors, healthcare becomes a lifeline. Climate migrants face a heightened health risks due to poor sanitation, water scarcity, limited access to medical facilities, compounded by frequent natural disasters that disrupt their lives. Friendship's healthcare model is designed to meet these needs through mobile clinics and floating hospitals that can navigate the rivers to reach even the most isolated communities. Climate action lies at the core of Friendship's work in the Chor. Our approach combines immediate adaptation of efforts with long-standing strategies to address the root causes and impacts of climate change. We recognize that Chor residents are among the most vulnerable to climate-related events, not only because of their proximity to the volatile river system, but also due to their limited resources and management of this. Friendship's climate resilient projects focus on sustainable land management, disaster preparedness, and community-based adaptation, and strategies to empower residents to protect their homes and livelihoods from the effects of climate change. In the Chors, where instability is a constant reality, education is an individual asset for building resilience and fostering hope for a better future. Friendship's educational initiatives aim to equip young people in these vulnerable communities with knowledge and skills that enable them to thrive despite the circumstances. Moreover, friendships leveraged in technology to provide alternative learning solutions, such as remote learning and digital education centers, ensuring continued education, even during times of crisis. Friendship works with the concept of mobility as much as possible. Therefore, the schools can be disassembled and reassembled in areas where the land has risen. So that becomes, we recognize the mobility of the aspect of requirement of the chores. We thus now come to targeted vocational training. We empower individuals, especially women and youth, with skills tailored to the needs of their communities. Small grants and micro development help them invest in business, home improvements, and disaster-resilient infrastructure, allowing them to thrive in a climate landscape. Friendship financial programs go beyond immediate relief, fostering economic independence that strengthen community resilience and give climate migrants a sense of ownership and empowerment in their environment. Friendships, the decades of experience and comprehensive model demonstrates that securing legal rights and enhancing resilience in climate vulnerable communities are achievable goals. However, the work cannot succeed in isolation. The challenges faced by climate migrants in Bangladesh, and particularly in the chores, demand a collective effort. We must address the systematic issues that drive displacement and leave communities vulnerable to the impact. Government, NGOs, civil societies, and international organizations must collaborate to create an environment in which displaced people are not merely surviving, thriving. Climate-induced migration is not just a Bangladeshi issue. It is a global crisis that will increasingly affect communities around the world as climate impacts intensify. Friendships work in the chores provides a model for how other countries might address smaller challenges, similar challenges. Our project demonstrates that with targeted, coordinated action, it is possible to enhance resilience, secure legal rights, and empower communities to face a changing climate with confidence. However, we must recognize that there is still much to be done, and we call upon our national and international partners to join us in building a future where climate migrants are afforded the rights and resources that need to rebuild the future. Friendship's track record of success in the chores speaks to the effectiveness of our approach by integrating legal aid, healthcare, and climate action. We provide comprehensive support to communities that have been systematically marginalized. We have shown that securing legal rights is not just documentation, but also granting individuals a stake in the communities, empowering them to build a future on their terms. Through our partnership with local, national, international stakeholders, we advocate for policies that support climate migrants, amplifying their voices and raising awareness about the challenges they face. We recognize the power of popular media in driving change by sharing stories of climate migrants through films, articles, and social media. We bring experiences to a wider audience, inspiring action and fostering empathy. Our advocacy efforts demonstrate that while the challenges are significant, they are insurmountable, really. And Friendship is committed, therefore, to leading by example, showing that strategic right-based interventions can create lasting changes in the lives of climate migrants. We look to a future where we remain hopeful. The path forward is clear. Through collaboration, innovation, and steadfast commitment to justice, we can build a world where climate migrants are not merely statistics, but valued members of our global community. I conclude with friendship will continue to stand with the people of the chores, working alongside them to build a more resilient, equitable future. Together, we can ensure that those most affected by climate change are not left behind, but are empowered to shape their destinies with dignity and security. But we need the international world to come together and ensure that there are laws that are passed, laws that
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Tahsin. Truly, I mentioned in the very beginning, we can't afford frustration. And it's true, there are crises is a very beyond our imagination, true. But there are plenty opportunity exist, and there are plenty proven solution exist in this world. We need to find the solution, we need to replicate, we need to support the solution. One thing really, and in your very inspiring from your experience, what we learned, that is, yes, within this critical, and sometimes, these vulnerable people do not realize they have rights. They feel they are excluded. So connecting them with the existing rights and create and revisit the rights to help them to adapt with the new situation. The same person who was in community and lost everything, he was asset in his own community. And next morning when he is heading for the city, he is burdened. And this guy who has the knowledge for his own land, he knows how to grow crops, how to manage livestock. He knows his nature. He knows everything. Only he lost his land, and that forced him or her and family to a different land in the city, and they are burdened. Before Professor François, and yesterday we attended in a research finding session with you, and last couple of session I attended, I realized there are solutions with this indigenous knowledge, and there are we need to learn from their experiences, and we can look back the solutions and other taking forward the frustration. Now, Professor François, I know you know him, you all know him. He's a director of Hoque Observatory, University of Liège, and he's a leading voice on climate migration. And we are fortunate to have his expertise here today. Professor François, please.
Thank you very much, and good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are located in the world. It is a pleasure to say a few words of comment after what we've just heard, because having worked on people displaced by climate impacts in different parts of the world, I'm really amazed to see how friendship in Bangladesh with the people of the Shah has really managed to encapsulate the different needs and aspirations of the people. And to me, this is a kind of model way of working with people displaced by climate change. Alas, in other parts of the world, there is no friendship on the ground, which does not necessarily mean that there is absolutely no policy or no framework in place, but they often lack. I would think what is really the key characteristic of friendships intervention, which is the protection of the dignity of the affected people. In many places of the world, one of the key impacts on climate change, on the migration of people, is to reduce their agency. And what I mean by that is that increasingly, people are either forced to leave or forced to stay and can no longer make the decision by themselves. Very often when we discuss climate-induced migration in public debates or in the media, we have a tendency to frame it as a future risk that would be somewhat unavoidable. And we also have a tendency to imagine that the biggest impact of climate change on migration will be to increase the magnitude of migration. And this is the reason why media reports are replete with figures like hundreds of millions or zillions of people displaced. Yet, the strongest impact of climate change on migration is probably in the transformation of the patterns of migration. That is, that people migrate differently when they're affected by climate change. Increasingly, people are forced to leave because there has been no intervention where they are to guarantee that they could actually stay. And therefore, beefing up the resilience of the populations affected by climate impacts should be a priority. At the same time, we need to recognize that in some cases, migration can be an adaptation solution, and that migration can help households diversify their income, can also help relieve the demographic pressure on environmental resources. And therefore, it is important in those circumstances to have programs and policies that actually facilitate the migration of people and make sure that such migration happens in the best possible conditions, preserving the rights and dignity of the migrants. Then we also need to recognize that the most vulnerable populations are often unable to migrate. Migration requires a lot of financial capital, social capital, cultural capital, and typically, and I say this for any place of the world and for any kind of climate impact, typically the most vulnerable populations are unable to live in the face of danger because they don't have enough money, because they don't have enough information, because they don't have enough connection, because they don't have enough means of transportation. All of this makes it that climate change force people to stay. And I think that we need to recognize that forced immobility is a problem at least as big as forced migration and displacement. The key task ahead of us when trying to address climate change, which is what we're trying to do right now at COP29 in Baku, is to guarantee that the Earth remains uninhabitable for all, including for the most vulnerable populations, including also for indigenous populations who often count amongst the first to be displaced as a result of environmental impacts. And therefore, this focus on habitability, I think, needs to be the guide of the different policy interventions. That implies also to take into consideration the subjective perceptions of climate impacts by local populations. Too often, we have a tendency to define habitability on the basis of climate models and to say that if we pass a certain threshold of temperature, or threshold of humidity, or of sea level rise, this land or that land is no longer inhabitable. It is important to recognize that habitability is also subjectively defined by the populations affected by those climate impacts. And we need to recognize that element of subjectivity and the fact that it is very difficult for policymakers to decide in the place of the people themselves. And therefore, we need to recognize that people might be willing to stay in places that are not considered as habitable. And the question is, how do we proceed in these cases? And in the same way, we need to recognize that people might be willing to move out of an area before it is deemed uninhabitable. And I think taking into consideration such subjective perceptions is important. But at the same time, we also notice that such perceptions are often different from the observed climate impacts. And that is because a lot of people don't have access to climate information and to climate services. And therefore, improving access to climate information and to climate services could be a way to try and reconcile the objective realities of climate impacts with the subjective perceptions of people. Finally, and I don't want to be too long so that we have some time for questions and answers, I think it is important to recognize that climate-induced migration is not a discrete, distinct category of migration, and that in many places of the world, environmental factors and climate factors in particular will influence the social, political, and economic factors driving migration. In recent years, at least in Europe, we've had a tendency to try and clearly distinguish between refugees migrating because of political persecutions and economic migrants migrating in the search of a better life. And since the Syrian refugee crisis, we've had a tendency to put a normative value to these categories, as if they were, on the one hand, the good refugees whom we should welcome, and the bad migrants whom we should send back home. I think such a categorization of people based on the motives of their migration is deeply wrong and is certainly not supported by empirical research. For years, research has shown that the motives of migration were intrinsically linked to each other, were intertwined, and were also influencing each other. This is obviously the same with climate-induced migration. And very often there is a tendency in public debate to imagine that climate change would create a new distinct category of migration. It is important to recognize that climate change is also affecting the political and economic drivers of migration. Is affecting food insecurity, is affecting tensions, all of those factors leading to migration, and therefore recognizing also in legal terms the increasingly important role that climate change is taking in current migration dynamics seems to be paramount for me if we are to imagine legal frameworks that would be tailored to the needs of the people. And very often those legal frameworks will need to be extremely context dependent. And we need to pay attention to the fact that any framework we could discuss in international law might apply very differently depending on the situation people find themselves in. And that's what I wanted to say. Thanks for the opportunity, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Professor François. It's a very powerful speech and statements. I just quoted some, I just noted some. Migration can be an adaptation solution. Definitely here in Baku, we need to raise our voice with this statement. Migration is not a favor, it can be an adaptation solution. And another point you mentioned, migration requires a lot of financial and social capital and focus on habitability. And another critical points, the categorization itself, I think it fuels for discrimination and stigma. We'll listen from our, so far my knowledge, around 5,000 participants today from around 113 countries attending today's session. So I'm sure all we lend our hand to raise our voice for these things. Now I'll go for audience, and I will thank you both of speakers for your insightful presentation. And I would like to share floor with a few questions to frame our discussion. One is the audience, you can share your thoughts in addition to your points. That is, what strategies can government and NGOs implement to enhance early warning systems for communities facing climate risk? How do we integrate right-based framework? And what are the most effective models you considered? So one question already, let's open the floor, and one question I already received. This is, Antoine, I can't see the question now. Someone raised a question about the
Let me just amend
migration
that.
can be adaptation solution. That was the issue, and that is linked with different other issue, other factors. That was the question.
That's right. Yes, maybe they have deleted the question now, but since you read it before, now would you like me? Somebody else as well has asked a question, sort of like a cross-cutting question. So would you like me to also mention it now?
Yes, you can.
Yes. So basically, it's in relation to coordination and advocacy. So it's what role do you think NGOs like Friendship, academic institutions, and international organizations can play in bridging the gap between policymaking and the lived realities of climate migrants? And how can these different actors better coordinate to advance the legal rights and resilience of these communities?
For the three speakers, I don't know.
Yes.
Start. Uh,
Would you like me to?
Professor François, would you start? Then, okay, I can go for Barrister Ayesha Tahsin.
Sorry, could you? There was a short cuttage of internet. So could you reframe the question or repeat the question?
Antoinette, please.
Certainly. So the question is for like a cross-cutting question. So it's sort of mixed. So the first one is like, what role do you think NGOs like Friendship, academic institutions, and international organizations can play in bridging the gap between policymaking and the lived realities of climate migrants? So that's the first part of the question. And then the second part of the question is, how can these different actors better coordinate to advance the legal rights and resilience of these communities? So it's a compiled question that the person has asked to all the panelists.
I see. I think there are definitely plenty of things that need to be done. The first one is that it is important to consider that, at least in this field and in my experience, typically policymakers genuinely try to do good and are genuinely open to discussions with NGOs, with academia, and with a wide range of stakeholders. The question is how to make sure that the viewpoints of NGOs and of academia are heard. I think one of the good example of this is the scheme of the Platform on Disaster Displacement, which is, as you probably know, an international organization which began its activities in 2016 and which is dedicated to the protection of people displaced by environmental changes. And that organization, which is a policy-making organization, has a consultative committee made up of NGOs and academia. And I think that the collaboration on this has been excellent. And we've seen clearly how different policy programs were actually incorporating the views from NGOs and academia. And I think that for this to happen, it is really important to have constructive dialogues with authorities, and therefore policy workshops and those sorts of bilateral dialogue really help a lot, and very often help more than just publishing briefing notes and these kind of things. My experience is that interpersonal contacts with the policymakers is certainly the best way to make things advance.
Great. Barrister Ayesha Tahsin, I think, Antoinette, I'm sure her internet is stable now. Can you switch on camera and then add your points, please?
Hi, hello. Yes, I think this is it's a pertinent question in that, you know, how do we, it's such a huge thing from the field to the government to the international spectrum. So basically, I think what I would like to say is we initially, what we do is we, which can be applied finally, is we first do kind of a research and a presence in the chores, for example. We ensure that our presence is there, and then we via various techniques, we have a paralegal system, which is quite it's an innovative system in a lot of ways. We have paralegal booths, and then we have whoever is affected in any way, seeking redress with the government, seeking redress with the local communities, etc. They all come to a paralegal center where, all kinds of discrepancies in the system and all that are highlighted. Various meetings are held. Various alternative ADRs are held, and basically knowing that there is an access to justice where it's needed. Now, how do we work and how do we bring the two together? What we do is we work with the local government. We take the local government, we've got very good local representations, at a very, junior tier, where it's called a union parishad, where people go for addressing these kinds of issues. Now, what we do after that is if a local community is unable to sort it out, and then we take it to the nearest land government offices. And we ask them to hear what is the problem really that is happening. And then we kind of keep at it with them, whether it is the health, whether it's the social welfare department, whichever department is required, we kind of ensure that, our work is taken to them, our problems are highlighted with them. At the local level, again, in the land, we have lawyers and advocates who pursue litigations that are required. And then that comes back as a feedback, and that is again highlighted with the government, and then we start pushing it to the national level. I'm just going to go very brief. We have Bangladesh has various plans which are extremely good. One is the Delta Plan, which is trying to ensure that the rivers are more stable, and all the work that is being done around river and the Chor people. And there are various. I would request you to have a look at the various national plans that we have, which are very, very relevant. As far as policy making, again, it's said that we are doing very, very strong national level advocacy with the governments at the head. As far as academia is concerned, I hope I've answered it, though it's not fully, lack of time. As far as academia is concerned, yes, we can't do any kind of academia within a year, 2 years. But, I think all our sectors have, and recently IC has, worked jointly with Dhaka University. It's quite a reputable university in development and law, etc., and climate. We've worked with them, and they finally brought out a beautiful book of illustrations and impact study. So this then goes to the government, and etc. And then so this is how we progress from the very minute local level at the community level, and then we move on with the various government tiers, the justice system, and then the academia. So
Thank you. Thank you so much. We are very close. One thing I think for the audience, as I'm aware, you are demonstrating model and opportunities in the community and taking those learning for the capital policy making, and university engage for validating the whole thing and exploring new opportunity. And one interesting point I would like to share here, you connecting media as an instrumental for all those things to create pressure on government and policy making. I'm sure Professor François, did you see the question or comments for you? You may take a minute just to answer. Habitability is a key question related to climate migration. Communities should have possibility to remain living where they have always lived. To manage this question of habitability, funds and capacities will obviously be necessary. So under which funding stream would project and efforts to maintain habitability fall? Development and humanitarian aid, climate adaptation, or loss and damage? Big question, if you kindly.
Well, it's a big question, obviously a bit of the three, but I think mostly it should fall under the realm of climate adaptation. To me, this is what adaptation is all about, and how can we make sure that adaptation policies foster the habitability of the territories, which is why I'm concerned when sometimes adaptation policies include the relocation of people. And clearly, I'm not saying that relocation shouldn't be or couldn't be an option at some point, but that shouldn't fall under the realm of adaptation in my belief.
Excellent. Now, thank you everyone for your valuable contributions today. To conclude this vital session on climate resilience and migrant rights, I'm honored to invite Her Royal Highness Princess Marie-Esméralda du Réthy, Chair of Friendship Belgium, to share her closing remarks. She's involved with plenty of organizations for nature, for indigenous people rights, and she's very focused and vocal in the capital and in different platforms. Your insights and leadership in this space inspire us all. Princess Esméralda, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Kazi. Well, thank you all for being part of this very important discussion on building up climate resilience through legal rights for climate migrants. I have just a few thoughts I would like to share with you. We have covered essential ground today of how we can and we should strengthen legal framework to protect those most vulnerable. We heard the statistics, which reminds us of the urgency. The UN just published a report saying that climate chaos is driving a rising refugee crisis. The number of people fleeing conflicts doubled to more than 120 million in the last 10 years, but 90 million of those are in countries which have a high exposure to the climate chaos. I would give two examples. The people fleeing conflict in Sudan have moved to the neighbor country Chad, which is highly exposed to those climate hazards. And we can talk of Bangladesh, where 1 million people coming from Myanmar have found refugee there. And of course, Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. I think that Professor Gemenne made a very important comment about the fact that it's difficult sometimes to separate refugee fleeing conflicts, climate, or just for a better life. Nowhere more than Central America is an example of that. People going to the United States often are looking for better economical situation, but they're also fleeing very difficult conflicts and also climate change. What stood out today was the multifaceted approach that we need. We need to redefine climate migration in international law because climate migrants lack formal recognition. We need this legal protection for them to access health, education, housing. But legal rights are much more than just protection. They are an empowering tool for those migrants to become a contributing members of their community. And I would like to quote Anila Noor, who is an expert for the EU in migration. And she said recently, "I dream of refugees, not just recipients of aid, but active participants in shaping the policies that affect them." So to conclude, let me try to say, let's translate all those insights of today into action, different action, because there is a lot of injustice in the climate crisis, social injustice, geographical injustice, gender injustice, and migrants obviously are part of this terrible injustice. So let's try to have also inclusive governance upholding human rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very crispy and powerful. May I request speakers to switch on your camera for a photo session, and then we'll conclude. I'm sure our communication colleagues needs this. And I can see still Barrister Ayesha Tahsin.
It's not switching on. It's probably locked from. Yeah.
Oh, Antoinette,
Ah,
please.
voila. We did it.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Antoinette, why don't you join with us? Dr. Antoinette, my friend. Excellent. So thank you so much for this very vibrant and thoughtful session. And thank you for joining. I know who are here in Baku, Professor François heavily engaged for different session. And thank you, our audience. Thank you who are our back support, my colleagues. And I appreciate, thank you, Gwyn Foster, Rashida, for support for this session. And my friend, Dr. Antoinette. I'm with my appreciation, thanks, gratitude, handing over to you. Antoinette, you mute.
Thank you very much, everybody. I think this was a very enjoyable, and I think it has raised so many issues that I like. It does need much more research and much more attention. So the recording as well of these videos for those who were not able to join will be on our website. So yes, thank you very much and have a lovely rest of the day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.